la famille.
Thanks. So can you hear me right? Yeah? Cool. Okay, well, nice to meet you. My name is Matthieu, so I don't need to introduce myself because Hugo did it pretty well, so I'm just going to skip that part. Just to let you know that if you have any questions after, you can obviously come to me, and I'd be glad to try to answer your questions, because I don't have all the answers, but I try to help you and maybe get some help from you too. Because as you'll see in the presentation, there's a lot of topics that we have not covered yet, and we are still experimenting, so maybe you will be helping me around beers downstairs. Okay, so I'm here to talk about Doctolib and what we are trying to do in Europe. As Hugo said it, we started in France, so we are a French company. Started 4 years ago now. 3 co-founders, Stan, Yvan, and Jesse, and they started the company in Paris. So that's where we started 4 years ago. And the idea at the time is that we realized that healthcare has not been that innovative when it came to the service. And we thought that using technology, we could really change healthcare for the better. And we started out like that. And the goal at the beginning was really to improve healthcare for everyone in France and in Europe. So the idea was, how can we use technology to improve healthcare and make it easier for the people to access healthcare and for healthcare professionals to work on their daily life. So that was the idea at the really beginning, and we still have the same idea 4 years after. So yeah, so the vision that we have 2 main objectives, 2 things that we every day trying to achieve. The first one is what I just said, so is provide the best daily tools for patients and doctors in order to improve the healthcare system, basically. So that's what we do on a daily basis. The important word here is the best daily tools. We build products, we build softwares, and what we care about is that they are used every day by patients and by doctors. And that's really key to everything that I will say after that, is that our goal is to build tools that will be used every day by patients and doctors. And the second objective, which is as important as the first one, is to be able to build a team of 2,000 people, 3,000 people that share the same culture and the same mindset. And that's also something that is really, really important. And for us, those 2 objectives are at the same kind of level, because we think that the only way that we can achieve what we want to achieve is by having the best team possible. So throughout the presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about people, because in the end, it comes down to that. And even though I'm alone here tonight to talk to you about Doctolib, the work is done by a lot of people, a lot of great people. And so that's what I will tell you just after that. So, it's the first time that I use something like that, so. Okay, yeah. So now on to what is exactly Doctolib. So as I told you, we built a product for patients and for doctors. And for patients, what we provide is quite simple. We allow everyone to find reliable information about doctors, clinics, hospitals online. Then you can pick the doctors or the institutions that you like and make a booking. That's as simple as that, but believe it or not, it wasn't properly done in France, in Germany, or in Europe before we started. And also the last thing that we provide is allowing you to manage all of your appointments. So let's imagine that you want to reschedule, you want to cancel. You don't have to call your doctor again. You can do it online or from your app. So it's quite simple, but that's something that was not done before. And that's what we work every day to achieve, basically. So that's for the patients. And then, yeah, I should point it to the computer. And then for the doctors, we provide the doctors with a software. So it's a software that we built internally, and that allow the doctor to manage their whole organization. So we work with doctors, but also clinics and hospitals. Today we have more than 30,000 doctors using our software on a daily basis. And what we let them do is first provide their patient with a new service. So now as a doctor, you are giving the opportunity to your patients to basically book an appointment 24/7 for free. It's also a new generation agenda. So as you know, maybe the key for the doctors is to manage their agenda and make sure that they don't have blank spots in their agenda. So we provide them with a tool to do that in a much better way than what they had before. Then we also help them on organizing their practice and their hospitals. And finally, we provide them with tools to manage their online presence and also to manage their what we call the no-shows. So a no-show is basically when you want to go to the doctor, you make a booking, and then you don't want to go anymore because you're not sick. And because you're too ashamed to call, then you just don't go. And that's the nightmare for doctors, and we help them reduce that as much as we can. So all these value benefits are the key to the service that we provide to the doctors. As I told you, we are on a path to try to innovate and to change healthcare. And in order to do that, you can do it in a lot of different directions, and we try to do it in all 4 directions. So what we are trying to do is first helping the doctors to have a better organization. Then second, we're trying to improve the relation between the patient and the doctors. Then the relation between doctors. And finally, the way patients can deal with their own healthcare. So those are really the 4 key axes where we work on a daily basis to improve and change healthcare. So that's basically all the service that we provide. So now onto some numbers. There won't be too many numbers because I don't want you to get bored, but just to give you an idea of what we've done since we've started. So we started in 2014, so almost 4 years ago. So that's a picture of Stan, one of the co-founder when he started. And then, as you can see, we managed to grow quite fast. Now we are roughly at 30,000 doctors. So it means that we have 30,000 doctors using our service on a daily basis. And we have more than 12 million people visiting our website every month, right? So that's what we've done in 4 years. Obviously, there has been a lot of success down the road. I'm not gonna tell everything, but one key event was the launch of Germany, which was a year ago, or a bit more than a year ago, a year and a half. So roughly 2 years ago, we decided that it was the time to open a new country because, as I told you earlier, our objective is not to change healthcare only in France, but to change healthcare in Europe. And we had to start somewhere. So we started with Germany. I'm gonna before talking about why we choose Germany and how we did it, just to give you a quick overview of our ambition and how we plan to achieve that. So we had the chance to raise some money. So in total, we've raised roughly 50 million euros from different investors. And the goal, again, is to consolidate our position in France and in Germany, where we are the number 1, and obviously to continue to grow in Europe. So everything that we are going to talk after, like how do you expand to another country, is something that we are still doing and that we want to do more and more in the future. So why did we decide to launch Germany? So a lot of people ask me that question. I wasn't at Doctolib when we made the choice, but now it all makes sense. So Germany is the biggest market in Europe for what we do, but also for a lot of different things. And when you look at just at the numbers, so in Europe, there's roughly 8 billion appointments every year, and 25% of that happens in Germany. So Germany is a big market, the biggest market in Europe. You have 400,000 doctors, so that's a big market for us. As I told you, we have 30,000 doctors. We are the clear number 1 in Europe, but there's still a lot to do. So just in France and in Germany, that's almost 800,000 doctors, and we only have 30,000 doctors. So the margin is quite big for us to continue to grow, basically. And a figure that is true for Germany, but that is true for a lot of different markets, is that basically a third of the time of the doctors and their staff are spent in administrative tasks. And that's where we come into play, and that's where we can help them have a better organization and in the end be more efficient. So that's why we choose Germany. Yeah, I'm having some trouble with the... Okay. So another question is why we chose Germany before other countries, because a lot of people are asking us, okay, but why didn't you choose Belgium, for example? Because in Belgium, half of the population speaks French, so that could be useful for us. But in the end, when you look at the size of Germany compared to some other European countries, you realize that Germany is quite big, and so the market is quite big for us and quite interesting. So that's why in the end we said, okay, Germany is the best market for us. It's quite a difficult market, and we are going to talk about that later. But in the end, we thought that the most ambitious target was to start in Germany. So just last figures that I'm going to show you quickly. In France and in Germany, this is what we achieved. I don't want to talk too much about that because I already told you that. But basically in France, as I told you, the number is not right anymore. Now it's closer to 30,000 doctors, but we've been able to grow quite fast. Now we are working with 30,000 doctors, 800 clinics and hospitals. We've been able to convince a third of the population in France to use our service. So that's quite big, but it's only the beginning. And in Germany, we just started, so we are building a 100% German company. We have offices in Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, Düsseldorf, and Munich. And we will continue to grow next year. And we plan to recruit roughly 100 people in the next 18 months, basically. So that's a big challenge. So now on to the next slide. Okay. So the question that I'll try to discuss with you today is how to make it in Germany, because as we'll see, Germany is quite a challenging market, and so we have a lot of challenges that we are trying to resolve, some better than others. And so the question today is, how can we make it in Germany? How can we succeed in Germany the same way that we succeed in France, basically? So the main challenge for us when it comes to grow in Germany are those ones. So the first one is how to really take root and build an organization that is tailor-made for the German market. That's the first challenge. Second one is how to hire in a country where a lot of people already have jobs. So it's quite hard for us to hire in Germany. And the last one is to build your network and build your sales operations in a different country. So that's what we are going to discuss mainly. We are going to tackle different topics. I'm going to try to give you some examples. If it feels a bit too abstract for you, don't hesitate to ask me some more questions. But that's what we are going to talk about today. So the first thing that I wanted to discuss was about taking root and adapting your organization. So on top, you see that I wrote be humble, because one of our core values is trying to be as humble as possible. And even though we have achieved some good things in the past, we know that pretty much everything is still to be done. So when it comes to, in our opinion, when it comes to open a new market, you need to get back to the key, what makes the key of your company, which is basically the ID and the product and the team, right? So this is a team, this is a sports team that you can see on the left. So it comes down to that for us, and the idea is that at the beginning, maybe we complicated a bit too much all the process, and we realized that the key is to keep it as simple as possible. And just because you are going international doesn't mean that you have to build a whole engine and that you have to overcomplicate it stuff. So that's why we say keep it as simple as possible. So one thing that we did is in the company we have different strategic objectives. So how to build the best team possible, how to improve our sales organization, how to raise money, etc. But the number one key initiative that we have in the company, so the number one objective of the roughly 400 people within our company, is to make sure that Germany is a success. So everyone in the company has this core objective, and that allows us to make sure that Germany will come first. Because what we found is that when you start to grow, and today, as I told you, we have 400 people, things are obviously more complicated than when you started, basically. And we realized that everything was not as fast as it was in the past for the German team. So now we have process, we have a product roadmap, we have a lot of different things that makes everything a bit slower, and we don't want that for Germany. So one thing that we did is prioritize Germany above everything to make sure that all the process remain as simple as possible for the team. And that's something that we are trying to do on a daily basis. It's quite hard, but I think that's one of the key to make sure that the country that you are building is not too slow, basically. And a lot of people that I meet, they tell me that their new country, so Germany, is not working because basically the team on the ground in France is not 100% dedicated to the success of this new country, because they think, okay, we are quite big in France, why spend some time to develop Germany? And that's something that we didn't want to happen for us in France, and that's why we really prioritize everything toward the success of Germany. So that's one of the key learnings that we got. The second is that is really important also for us is to start from the bottom again, start from scratch, because when you've been working for a long time the same way and it has been successful, then when you come to a new market, you tend to say, okay, I've did that for a long time, so I'm just going to replicate what I did, and it's going to work. But in effect, it doesn't work like that, because the market is different and the people are different. So one thing that we try to do is to try to start from scratch again. And everything that you knew, obviously you don't throw it out, but you try to think about it again in these different contexts. So a couple of examples that we did. A lot of people from France that have been here for a long time, they came back on the field to see doctors, to see hospitals and clinics in Germany to meet the client again, to understand exactly what was different in France, from France to Germany, basically. And that's something that, in our view, is quite important, is to start again. Obviously, you use everything that you've learned, but you kind of start again. And everything that you did when you developed your company in your own market, you have to do it again in the second market. Just because you are bigger doesn't mean that now you have to do things differently. You have to start from scratch again. And that's something that is not easy to do, I think, but I think that's something that is quite useful for us and that allowed us to change a lot of process internally. So now when we come to hire, so we talked about hiring, and we found that it's quite difficult to hire in Germany, or at least for the positions that we are hiring. So I told you we have roughly a team of 45, 50 people in Germany, and we plan to recruit 100 people in the next 18 months. So it's like, I'm tired, like 5 or 6 people every month, basically, which we found is quite a challenge. First, because in France, we were a French company, and a lot of people knew about us. So we had a lot of inbound. A lot of people were applying for the jobs that we had open in France. But obviously, when you come to Germany, nobody knows you, so you don't have that many applications. And you have to think again on how you hire to adapt to that. And what we did is really change the way we do recruitment to adapt it to those new conditions. And what we did is we hunted a lot more. So in France, most of the applications and most of the hires that we do, they are inbound, so they come to us. And in Germany, that's the opposite. Like, I think 90% of the hires that we had over the last year came from hunting, basically. But hunting, we didn't know how to do that much. So basically, we think again on how to be the best hunting company in Germany to make sure that we attract the best talent. And it was quite interesting because we had to kind of break down again what is hunting for talents. And we came down to that, so it's not a magical recipe, but it's just the way we kind of structured it. And we said, okay, to hire and to find the best talent, first you need to have the right targeting. So you have to know your markets. So one thing that we did in Germany, say, okay, we don't have a lot of applications, so let's think about the best companies in Germany where we could find the best talent for what we do, obviously. So the best companies for us wouldn't necessarily be the best company for you, but we kind of did a big list of all the companies that were interesting for us in Germany, and then we call everyone, basically. So that's what we did to find the right people. Then in terms of volume, it's what we call the hunt, so contacting a lot of people. We had to find a lot of tricks, a lot of techniques to be as efficient as possible. So we took a lot from marketing, CRM stuff, to make sure that we could do enough volume to get to the right talents. And finally, it's conversion. That's something that is, we talked about being humble, and I think that when you hire in a new market, you have to be humble because nobody knows about you. So when you do a recruitment process, a lot of the time you are actually selling your own company. And this is definitely something that you have to do because in France, I would say that 70% of the people we want to hire, they know about us. I think in Germany, it would be 10 or 15%. So obviously it's growing as we grow in Germany, but at the beginning, the first interviews that you have, the first phone screen that you have to sell your company. And that's something that you have to learn. So the sales, they know how to sell Doctolib, but now the HR team, they need to know how to sell Doctolib too. So we worked on scripts, on targeted emails to convince people to be interested about Doctolib. And that's something that we didn't do in the past, and that was quite useful for us to implement that in Germany. And now we are using kind of the same methods to hunt for developers in France. Because as you know, it's quite hard to find developers everywhere in Europe, especially in France. So we kind of took everything that we learned in Germany to apply it after that in France for the tech recruitments. So it has been quite useful and kind of a feedback loop for us, where we went in a new market, learned some stuff, and then reapplied it to the first market. So in the end, it was quite positive for us to have to go back to what is finding the best talent. So that's what we did. Now I'm going to talk again about the team because, as I told you before, I'm here to present you how we grew from 0 to 50 people in Germany, and how we managed to convince thousands of doctors to work with us in Germany. But obviously, I'm not the only one. It's the work of the whole team to do that. So a lot of people are working on a daily basis to make this happen. And so in the end, it all comes down to your team. So whether it be the team that you have in your first market or the team that you are hiring, you have to know that opening a new country will ask a lot from the team, from everyone in the team. So you have to prepare them to that, and you have to convince them and to explain them why it's quite important to be involved in this process, right? So what we did, for example, to give you an example, we have in Germany we are active in different regions. We have offices in Berlin, Munich, Cologne, and Düsseldorf. And what we did is we have salespeople in all of these countries, and in order to help them learn faster and to grow faster, we asked from great salespeople in France to go to Germany and to be kind of mentors. And that helped them a lot to learn quickly. So that's something that we ask from some managers in France, is to spend some days in Germany with the team in Germany to help all the managers to learn faster. So that's why I told you that it asks a lot of your team, because if you want to do it right, you have to make sure that the transfer of knowledge is done really proactively. So that's what we did. So again, if you want to go international, you have to know that you will have to rely on the team that you have in your main market. Otherwise, it's in my view, it's not going to happen. Then about sales. So we talked about the fact that we kind of built our sales operation in France. It's working. In France, we managed to onboard more than 3,000 doctors every month. But obviously, in Germany, you cannot replicate exactly what we did in France. So what I wanted to say here is that obviously selling anything is hard. If you want to sell a software, it's even harder. And then if you want to sell a software in a new industry, it's even harder. And then basically, if you want to sell a software in a new industry, in an old industry, sorry, that you don't know, it's impossible. So the idea is that this is supposed to mean homework. So you have to do your homework. You have to be on the ground with your team to make sure that everything that is different from your first market to the second market, you really understand it to modify your process. And that's really key. And I think that sometimes people, they kind of overlook that fact. And they say, okay, I'm able to have 100 sales on the ground in France working perfectly, being really good at what they do. So it's going to be easy to do it in another market, but it's totally not easy. So one thing that we learned, for example, is that Germany is super decentralized. So as you may know, in France, a lot of things are happening around Paris, but in Germany, it's quite different. And so in Germany, you cannot say, okay, I'm going to build my business only from Berlin or only from Cologne or only from Hamburg. You have to quickly have this kind of regional approach that we didn't have to have at the beginning in France. And quickly and really early on in Germany, we had to adapt to this new organization. So what does that mean? It means that we had to recruit people in those different cities really, really early on. We had to recruit also people from account management locally. It's something that we don't do in France. So in France, all the account management is in Paris, but it's not the case in Germany. And we had to adapt because Germany is so decentralized that if you don't do it, then you won't be able to be as close as you want from your customers, basically. So that's something that we had to change. And we are still experimenting around that. So to understand exactly to what extent we have to decentralize. But anyway, we started the process because otherwise we wouldn't have been successful in this country. Then what I wanted to say in this slide is that you always have to go back to your product and your users. So one thing that we say a lot at Doctolib is that any innovation is not an innovation if you have no usage, if nobody uses what you are doing. So when we say that we have 30,000 doctors using Doctolib, it's really that they are using it on a daily basis throughout the day. And for us, it's quite important to have that. Otherwise, you will not be able to innovate, especially in healthcare, right? So that's why we make sure that every organizations, every clinics, every hospitals that we implement or that we deploy, we make sure that they have the perfect usage. And so when doing that in Germany, we quickly realized that we had to do some improvements in our product to adapt to the German market. So French and German market, when it comes to healthcare, they're quite similar, but there's still some difference. And if we had not understood those differences really quickly early on, then we would have been able to grow that fast. So for us, it has been quite instrumental to, again, be really close to our customers, to adapt our product. And again, just because you have a great product that is working in your own market doesn't mean necessarily that it's going to work in other markets. And for me, that is key if you want to roll out your strategy, if you want to grow really fast. Right? So that's something that we did. It took a lot of time from our great engineers to adapt the product, but in the end, it was key for our growth in Germany, basically. So that's kind of the end of the advice and the different process that we had to put in place. The goal for us and why we are working so much into operations and making sure that we are as good as possible in this topic is that we want to continue to grow. In the next years, we want to multiply by 5, or I mean, this number doesn't really is not really important. The idea is that we want to grow as fast as possible in France and in Germany. We have some leadership position, but it's only the beginning again. And so for us, being able to reach that many doctors and to have that many employees is only going to work if we continue to reflect on how can we grow the organization, open new markets while maintaining our operational efficiency. And the last slide is really simple, is that as I told you, we are recruiting a lot, and the main challenge for us is recruiting. So I'm always recruiting. So if any one of you is interested, then obviously you can come to me. I'm not going to take that long because I think it's good if we have some kind of Q&A. So if you have any questions now, I think it's the right time. Okay.
On average, when you recruit one salesperson in Germany, how many people do you have to screen? Meaning, like the funnel. What does the funnel look like? Cold emails, or I mean, like, first contact.
Yeah. I think we looked at it. We did some stats. I think it's almost 100. So like 1% basically.
Okay, so like how many people have you recruited per month on average since you arrived?
So we have roughly 55 people now, 55 people. So it makes I would say 5 to 6 people every month, basically.
Okay, and so you have to meet a lot of people every month.
Yeah, we have, because on the one hand, we want to reach out to as many people as possible, and on the other hand, obviously, we want to continue to be as demanding as possible on the quality of people, because as I told you, the team is key. So just because we struggle to recruit doesn't mean that we are going to lower the bar. So the idea is, if it takes more people to find the right one, then we are just going to contact more people.
Okay, and if nobody has a question, I have another one. So what are like the tips? And then I go. What are the tips on how to operationally, optimize this kind of tracking, meeting, hiring?
So we took a lot from the sales, because that's something that we know how to do. So the company was built almost by sales, and so we get a lot of good habits from that. So basically, what we do is we try to measure as much as we can. So that's how I can tell you that roughly we need 95 people to recruit one person. We need to contact 95 people, because we use an ATS, so we use Lever, but that's and so we track as much as we can. So for each position, we know exactly what is the funnel like. So exactly like in sales, we know exactly the conversion rate from contacted to responded. How many people went from the first interview to the second interview, and every time we look at those numbers, we're trying to be better at that. So, for example, at the beginning, we kind of struggled with the targeting, because we didn't really know the market. If you want to recruit in France in a startup, it's quite easy, because there's a lot of startup around, and the market is more liquid. But in Germany, it's not that much. So at the beginning, we had some trouble to find the right targets. So at the beginning, we had to contact even more people to get a response, and then to finally hire them. So in the end, we worked on targeting. So who are the best companies for us to recruit in? What are the best skills? And then we measure as much as we can. And then it's a lot of work, a lot of organization, and the great people that are working in talent. We have 3 people working in talent for Germany. They are organized almost as sales. So we focus as much as we can on organization, on the calendar, on making sure that they know how to sell Doctolib, they know how to be fast. So that's key, and it's really similar to what we do in sales in the end. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your great presentation. I have a question regarding growth as well, but more into the doctor's direction.
Yeah.
So basically it's two questions. First one is every doctor that you have within your booking system using your software as well, or is there also doctors that are just being able to be booked?
So to answer your first question, so what I said earlier is for us, innovation is only innovation if there's usage, right? Because you can invent anything, but it's only an innovation if you have people using it on a daily basis, right? Especially in healthcare, because today we see a lot of different innovations, a lot of different startups in healthcare, but most of the time when you actually look at it, you don't have that many people using it. So for us, when we say we have 30,000 doctors, it means that they are only using our solution to manage their appointments, basically. So that's the answer to your question.
All right, perfect. So this was the perfect setup for my second question.
This was a trap then,
yeah,
huh?
kind of.
Okay.
So from my understanding, it's pretty hard to convince any doctor in Germany to use any other software than what is the CPM or CRM? I don't even know the brand, but it's like a brand that owns like 50% of the market.
CGM?
CGM, yeah, maybe that might be the one. And so I'm wondering, how do you actually sell that software to doctors? How do you convince them? Do you have a special process? And what is the, what is your biggest sales argument in that?
So when you want to like disrupt, I don't like this word because I don't exactly know what it means, but when you want to disrupt an industry, especially if it has been around for a long time, obviously you have a lot of questions, a lot of objections, because basically the doctors that we going to see on a daily basis, sometimes they've been working the same way for like 25 years, and you come 25 years old and you explain them how to work again. So obviously there can be some difficulty. I think it comes down to two things. The first one is the quality of the product. So when we build the product, we build it with doctors, with doctors. So sitting in doctors' offices to build the product. So that helps a lot because we know exactly what are their pains. And then it's obviously having a sales organization that is super structured. So using obviously a CRM, making sure that all the scripts are known exactly, how to handle objections. So just to give you one example, the main objections that we have is the resistance to change. So they say, okay, it looks really nice, but I've been working this way for 25 years and it's doing well, so why would I change, basically? And then it's a question of obviously being a good relationship with the doctor, so making them understand that as soon as you get into the practice, you are on the same side. And then it's basically making them realize that even though they don't want to change, the landscape is changing, right? So if you ask them, okay, have you ever went on the internet to book a plane? Then they will say yes. To book a cab, then they will say yes. A hotel, they will say yes. A restaurant, yes. So in the end, a doctor, yes. So
well, I'm getting your point, because this is basically a very general answer. Yeah. But I'm having the trouble with doctors, so I know what to tell them and what to ask them as well. But it's more, I was thinking maybe like, what is the unique sales point for doctors within this? Are they looking for getting a better organization on their time management? Are they having fuller clinics? Are they gonna increase their revenue due to Egelleistung, or what is the huge benefit for the doctor on this?
I'm almost saying yes to your like all of what you mentioned. So it's a combination of different stuff, because we build the product to answer the most common questions of the doctors, right? So being able to have a full calendar is their main pain point. Making sure that they have less call is also a big pain point. So if you do your discovery well, you find exactly what is the pain point, then you can get into that. And normally we have a solution for the biggest pain point, and that's how we get into the door. And then it's sales relation, but the idea is really comes to that basically.
And is this an addition to their current system, or do they add, like, is it an addition, or is it the new system that they're only using then?
It's in addition, yeah, it's in addition. And then it's going to be a bit technical, so maybe we'll talk about that after, but yeah, it's in addition. So they have obviously softwares, and we come on top of that.
Okay, thank you. So if it's an addition, it means that you need to have some sort of integration with
I feel like I have some pros in the we have to have APIs. So what we do, even if it looks really simple, when I told you what we do, so online booking for patients, it looks really, really simple, And that's also the beauty of it. It looks simple for you guys, but in the end, in the inside, it's quite complicated because we have to integrate with a lot of softwares, a lot of companies, and that's also what I told you when I said that you have to do your homework. Is that when you have a complicated solutions like that, just because you manage to break into one ecosystem in your core market, doesn't mean that you will be able to exactly integrate into this new ecosystem. So that's where you have to do a lot of research, and you have to be really, really good to know exactly who are the people in digital health or in any other sector where you go. So it takes a lot of research. So it takes talking to CGM, talking to everybody doing digital healthcare in the market, and kind of prepare your new opening by having relationships with them before, basically. So in our case, we have to do APIs, we have to integrate with a lot of softwares. So in order to do that, in the next country that we are going to get in, we're going to have to meet all of those guys before, understand exactly the way they're working, understand exactly what is the dynamic of the industry. And so that is all the phase of preparation, basically. And it's basically doing your homework. Because if you come and say, okay, I integrate with 100% of the companies in France, so obviously I will do the same in Germany, you're totally wrong. Because you have to do it all over again. And you have to prepare that. So to short answer, yes.
If I may, one more question.
Yeah.
So selling software is difficult, yeah, because you need to learn, you need to teach doctors how to use it. So do salespeople do that, or they have some follow-ups afterwards?
Yeah, they do that. So for us, it's quite important again. So I'm repeating myself, sorry, but it's quite important that we have the right usage and the right adoption of what we do. Otherwise, it's nothing, you know. So that's why the salespeople, they're doing a great job of selling the solution, but of course implementing it. And that's key for us because, again, if you sign a piece of paper, is not, you know, the end of the relation. It's only the beginning of the relation. So when you start the contract with the doctor, that's where actually it begins. And so we do the training, we have account management, everything. But for us, it's key. And again, especially in a new market, being as close as you are in a new market than you were when you started is key. You know, when you build a product and you start in your own market, you as a CEO or as the founder, you go and sell directly your product, and you have the direct feedback of the customers, and you know as how important it is, but you have to have the same closeness in a new market. Just because you have 500 people doesn't mean that now you have to be not that close to your customers.
At the beginning of your presentation, you talked about your entrepreneurial vision, and that included the number of 2,000 employees that you wanted to build. Can you elaborate a bit on how you arrived at that number? Why do you stop at 2,000? Why not 10,000?
We did a business plan, really serious business plan, and at the end, the last column was 2,000. No, we did. I mean, it's a good question in the end because, as I told you, the number in the end doesn't really matter. We don't really care about how many people we end up with at the end. The only thing is we want to build the team that will be able to raise the challenge. So it might be 1,000, maybe 3,000. We don't really care, but we need to make sure that it's possible to do it. It's possible to have 2,000 people, 1,000 people working in 5 different countries. And we prefer to think ahead. We prefer to be in the mindset of, okay, at some point we'll have 2,000 people in maybe 5 different countries, so we might as well start now. And one thing that, for example, the companies that don't do that much when they think about international, they for a really long time they continue to speak in their origin language. So in our case, French. They would speak French for, you know, and they would continue to speak French in a lot of events, a lot of presentations, a lot of materials. And I think that it's quite important to be in a mindset of, okay, at some point I will have 2,000 people, so I need to start now. So to answer your question is, the number is not really important. What makes sense is that for us the team is key. And second, we have to be in the mindset of having a big team and making sure that we can work the same way we work. We worked with 10 people, with 2,000 people, basically. So the number is not right. I could have put 3,000. It's not business plan.
I'm curious about your sales process. So in B2B sales, it's usually quite tough to get through to the decision maker. And with doctors, I can imagine that it's especially tough because they are usually stuck in their office taking care of patients. So I'm wondering if you could share some insights or best practices and experiences you've gained over the time on how to best approach them, best tactics?
Both. So to answer your question and yours too. So obviously doctors and working with doctors is really interesting because it's you think you know how a doctor works, on a daily basis, but in the end you don't really know. Just because you went to the doctors a couple of times in your life, you don't exactly know the way they're working. So first you have to really understand the way they work. So you have to spend a lot of time with them. That's the first thing that I would say. So spending as much time with the doctors or with your target as possible to really understand when is the best time to approach them, to call them, to visit them. So that's, the key for me. So really understand the way they work and how to approach them. And once you know that, then you adapt your organization. So again, as I told you, in France, we are roughly 300 people. We have a lot of people on the ground. So we have people in roughly 35 cities in France. So on the ground, in Marseille, Bordeaux, Lyon, any city, you name it. So we have this kind of field sales organization because doctors, it's really important to be able to see them, to be with them, to see how they work. So that's why we have this kind of field sales organization. We also have inside sales, but we mix. And especially at the beginning of a market, even though now inside sales is working quite well in France, because we have the brand name, etc. When we started in Germany, obviously, we started again with the field sales, right? And in terms of sales process, I think that then it comes down to being as organized as possible. So you take everything that you know about doctors and then you apply it to your sales cycle and sales organization. So we have to have a lot of people on the ground. It means that we have to have great managers to, manage them on a daily basis. It means that we have to know as much as we can what is the situation in any city. So we have a big CRM with a lot of doctors in there, and we approach them on a really methodic way. We try to gather as many information as possible to qualify the doctors before contacting them. So this is not really specific, but in the end it comes down to that. So I don't think that there's a magic trick. I think it's really about obviously having great people, managing them really closely, and then know your target basically, or know your customer.
Okay, thank you. And then another question. So you repeatedly emphasized that it's really hard that you have a high usage of your product in the doctor's practices. So how do besides the great product, which is of course a key, how do you ensure usage? What are your tactics there? How do you ensure great usage besides the product? Because that's just a great product is not doing it. I would say
it comes a long way, but it's not the only things. Obviously, that's a tricky question. I think that again, being really close to the doctors. So again, we are not doing, doctors. They cannot, install the product by themselves. We have to be with them, and so for us, it comes down to the training. When you want people to change the way they work, you have to make sure that they really understand it. Because sometimes they say, yeah, I understood it, and in the end they are not using it exactly the way it should be used, and then the usage is not good, basically. So for me, it requires a lot of investment at the beginning. So at the beginning, I know that a lot of software organizations, they try to be obviously as lean as possible, which is normal, but I think that investing a lot at the beginning to be really, really close to the doctors, even though it seems, or to the targets, even though it's a bit counterintuitive, I think it's the key. So I would over-invest in the sales and the account management to make sure that right from the beginning you adapt your product to that, and then obviously a feedback loop with your developers. So you never develop something that you don't know if it will be used or not, basically. So everything that we do is because we know that the doctors will use it.
So I'm just curious, when your account managers take over now, do you send them to the doctors to make sure that every one of the front line staff knows how to use it? Or
for big organizations, we do. So for example, we have, so it was on the slide, but never mind. So recently we deployed our solution to a big institutions. It's called APHP for the French. It's the biggest public hospital organization in Europe. So it's like 35 hospitals in Paris. So it's a huge project. So we sold that, we won the tender offer, we deployed, and now obviously we have still people on the ground making sure that everyone is still trained. So that's why I talked about the investment, because obviously even though you've already deployed and the contract is signed, we still have people on the ground making sure that the product is used. and that's everything that we can do to make it better. Then we catch it really quickly, and then we implement it as soon as possible. So again, being really close to your customer, over-investing maybe in sales and account management, especially at the beginning. And I think that could help you, making sure that you have this usage.
So I have a question regarding like the network effects in the industry, because like the more patients kind of like use your product, the more easier or the easier the sales pitch to the doctors gets. So do you think it's a like winner takes it all market, or is like your customer relationship management, can it also like is it such a big part of the industry that more players could coexist? And in case it's like a winner takes it all market, how do you make sure to like stay ahead of competition, like Doctena or Mondoctor or other players?
So good question. So on obviously there is a big network effect. So we are in the end we are kind of a marketplace, right? A bit different, but we are kind of the marketplace. So at the beginning you have to choose between growing the demand or the supply, so growing the patients on the patient side or on the doctor side. Obviously, we chose a doctor because as a patient, if you go on our platform and there's no doctor, then there's no need. So we started with the doctors. The virtual cycle. We started with the doctors, then we had patients, and then more doctors, etc. So that's obviously happening, especially in France, and we see it happening in some cities like Berlin, Munich, in Germany. I don't know if it's a winners takes all, because I come from another company where. A lot of people say that it was food delivery, my first company, right? And a lot of people say that it was a winner takes all. And
what was the company again?
It's called Take It Easy. Okay. Yeah. So it was food delivery, and we lost, by the way, this battle that you're talking about. But in the end, you still have a lot of people doing that, in France. So in the end, I don't know if it's a winner takes all. We don't really care in the sense that, again, doctor by doctor and clinics by clinics, we make sure that they use our product and that they are satisfied with it, and that's the only thing that matters. So what I would say is that for us, competition is good, because in the end it opens up the market. In an old industry in an ancient industry like healthcare, I think it's good if we are not the only one trying to bring new services. So competition is for us beneficial. I mean. And so in the end, we'll see who wins. We're trying to do everything to be the ones that wins in the end. But it's not something that is driving us every day. Every day what is driving us is building the best team and helping as many patients and doctors, clinics, hospitals.
More questions? Yes. Just a little note in between. Like, how much did you guys look at regulation in Germany? Because, for example, Holland, you don't need a sick note from the doctor to call yourself sick. In Germany, you do. Yeah. So are these like little details? It's not a detail, I would say, because it's key. It's massive, So did you guys look at that?
Yeah, definitely. So that's also something that comes down to, doing your homework and making sure that what you do is actually adapted to where you want to go. So a big part of what we do in the growth team, because I'm part of the growth team at Doctolib, but obviously I'm not the only one. A big part of what we do is looking at the markets and actually trying to understand them and making sure that what we do is adapted to a market. So for example, the UK is a big market, but the way it's structured in healthcare with the NHS and different stuff makes it a bit harder for us to get into. So obviously there's a big research that you have to do. And again, that's why we said it's important to keep it to be humble, because if you are a bit you're a bit too happy with your success, you can kind of forget that. And so we did as many research as we could in Germany. We could have done more. We should have done more maybe. But in the end, it's key if you want to go in a new market. So yeah.
And I'm wondering a lot about whether you allocate a percentage of your resources and time for specific projects. For example, you are a platform. This means that you can play around with like additional resources or additional products you would dock in, like, I don't know, payment solutions for doctors, or some crazy growth channels or some viral stuff, How much time and resources do you allocate to projects that go beyond the classic script of your company?
That's a really good question, because that's something that we are thinking about a lot these days, because as I told you, we are only at the beginning of thinking about what we want to do tomorrow and the day after, etc. And so that's a good question. We have the chance to be at a size and to have sufficient investment to take the time to do those kind of stuff. So to kind of think, okay, this is what we are doing now. What could we do tomorrow, and where could we do it? So we have two teams. One team is more on the product side, looking at what is going to be Doctolib tomorrow. So you remember I showed you the different directions where you can innovate in healthcare. So relationship between patient and doctors, between doctors, healthcare management for patient, and organization of practices and hospitals. So all these different channels are key for us when we think about innovation. And so we have teams in the product team thinking about what we can do tomorrow in each of those channels. So dedicated team doing only that. And when it comes to growing internationally, we also have a team, a small team, because that's me. And obviously it's more people, but we have a really small team thinking about where we will go and how. So obviously, where you enter a new country, you can buy a company, you can do it. There's a lot of different ways to do it. So that's what we are thinking about. Obviously, we are lucky enough to have enough time and enough people and enough great people to think about that. But I think also it's key to be well prepared before making the big jump into a new service or a new market. Because anyway, things are not going to go as you planned in the end. So the more prepared you are, the easier it is to kind of anticipate that.
Thanks for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, so we've had a lot of technical details tonight, but a question about something more intangible. You've been talking about the team and how great it is. And so I would like to know, like, for you, what makes Doctolib so special in terms of culture and the people who work there? What you look for in like new candidates? And what's the biggest challenge regarding the culture as you're growing extremely fast?
Okay, so I think that one of the key things that we have internally, and that's also one of the reasons I was so excited to join Doctolib, is that we are often saying that we want to build Doctolib as a sports team. That's why you had all these emojis, of sports guy, because that's what we're trying to do. And obviously it sounds like a bit intangible and a bit abstract, and sometimes maybe bullshit, I don't know. But in the end, that's really what we're trying to do. And so for us, what it means is that everybody is owner of something. So we don't really care about management and leadership in terms of hierarchical stuff. What we want is everybody being the owner of what they do, and of course being accountable and having clear objectives. And I think that we trust a lot people, like as you would in a sports team. So obviously in a sports team, everybody has different roles, but in the end you have to trust the one guy that is in front of you or at your side to do his work. Otherwise it cannot work. And that's what we try to put in place. And in the end, it's really about trust. So it's about when someone comes to the company, he has a mission, and then we trust him entirely, even though he's new, even though he's not totally able to do it from scratch. And I think that it helped us a lot to grow. One other thing that we do is we try to build our company based on the people. So again, it may sound a bit bullshit, but in the end, what it means is that the company is only evolving based on what the people are good at and what they want to do. So a lot of the time we had to build again the company, build new departments only because we thought that this guy would be really good doing that. So in the end, we changed the company because we thought that this guy would be really great at that. So that's a big commitment. Sometimes it's difficult, but we try to commit to that. And then in terms of what we look for people, we just look for people motivated and that have the same ambition as we have. So being motivated to change an industry, it's quite hard to do it. It takes a lot of time. And so if you're up to it, then you are up for Doctolib, basically. So it's quite simple.
Who wants to join Doctolib?
Yeah? Okay, cool.
Hello. Could you please explain what you mean by changing the organization practices in an hospital?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, no, it's okay. So what we mean is again, practices and hospitals and clinics, they have been working the same way for a long time. So that's also what is funny with healthcare. So healthcare is obviously a space where there's a lot of innovation, because we come up with new drugs, new treatments, and a lot of stuff like that. But when you look at the way people in healthcare are working, it does not evolve as much as the rest, in healthcare. So they are mostly relying on the phone. Sometimes they use fax, this weird thing where you put a letter and then it comes out. So they use that also. Now, obviously, they use internet, but not that much, not as much as you would think. So what does it mean improving the organization of healthcare institutions? Is basically putting a tool that will allow them to communicate better with their patients. So let's imagine that you're a doctor, you have an emergency, and you cannot attend all your meetings in the afternoon. What you would have to do before, you would have to call all of them, try to reach them, leave a message, blah blah blah. Now with Doctolib, you can do it just with a click. You say, okay, I'm not going to be here, and then automatically we send a text to all the patients that were supposed to go after. So those are the small things that are really key when you manage a healthcare facility or healthcare organization. Then we also work in terms of communication between doctors, something that is not really well done. They call each other a lot, the doctors. So if you have a patient, you want to send the patient to another doctor, you have to call the guy. So you are quite busy. He's quite busy, but you still have to have him on the phone to send just the patient. So this is what we mean by innovating in the space of organization of the practice and the hospitals.
So with respect to user behavior, whether it is doctors or patients, what were the key differences between people in France and those in Germany, especially those that were challenged to seeding your organization here? And a second question is, what are the other markets that you're thinking of entering in the future?
Okay, so the first question, the difference, obviously there's some difference in the way people access to healthcare in France and in Germany, so that's basic stuff, but you had to adapt to that. One thing that we realized when we started in Germany is that the practice in Germany, so the doctor that you would go see in the street in Germany, it could be like 3 doctors with 10 assistants with a whole, an IT manager, a practice manager, so like almost like a company. And if you go to the doctor in France, most of the time it would be one guy, a waiting room, an exam room, and that's it. So just that makes it totally different when you approach a doctor in Germany than in France. So that's one of the things that we had to adapt to. And then in terms of behavior, so another example, so in Germany, people are quite fond of, not fond, but they are quite attentive to data security, data privacy. So I read the other day that more than 50% of the German people, they read, the terms and conditions, and in France it's like 2%, right? So once you realize that, then you have another look at your terms and conditions, and you make sure that they're really, square. So that's a silly thing, but that's something that you realize quickly early on. This is only like almost a funny example, but in the end it's quite important because you have to get into that mentality, and you have to adapt again your organization to comply to that. So it requires a lot of flexibility. Again, to be kind of humble enough to say, okay, this is working in France or in this country, but it doesn't work. Even if we try really, really hard, it doesn't work in another country. So let's change that. So that's the answer to the first question. And the second question, I cannot remember. So sorry. Yeah. Okay, that's why I cannot remember, because I cannot tell you. That's why. We don't know exactly yet, or we know, but even if I knew, I couldn't tell you. That's what the Secret Service, that's what they say when you ask them a question. So I couldn't tell you. Why? Because again, France and Germany, they are the biggest market in Europe. Being the leaders in those 2 markets is obviously key to the success of our company in the future. So obviously we are focusing on that. We are trying to be as successful as possible in the same market, and obviously at the same time we are obviously looking at what is happening in Europe, and maybe if there's some opportunity in another country, then obviously we look at it. That's part of the preparation that you do. So even though you're quite focused on your core market and it's the #1 priority, obviously you keep an eye on what's happening to be able to make the right decision. So sorry for this disappointing answer.
You said that some doctors, they use the platform to get less no-show, but the no-show, I mean, it's only for the patient who booked through the platform, right? Oh, it's for the other one.
So when the doctors that are using Doctolib, they use the software to manage all of their appointments, right? So they would open their computer in the morning, and then they will see all of their appointments within Doctolib. So appointments that have been taken online. So I go online, I book an appointment, or appointments that would be done on over the phone, or even face-to-face appointments. They all end up in our calendar, and then any appointments that has to be rescheduled or cancelled or anything, you get the same service. So if you take an appointment face-to-face with your doctor, and he's using Doctolib, then a day before you're going to get a text and an email to remind you of not forgetting this appointment.
Okay, so okay, it's a good point. Then it's not only for new patients. Yeah. But then, how do you help the doctors who don't get any new appointments? Because it's a monthly subscription, as you mentioned. So you might have a lot of doctors who drop after 1 or 2 months if they don't get any booking.
Yeah, good question. So there's two things. Usually, it's not only about getting more new patients, because again, because the doctor, there's a lot of value just by having a more organized practice. So that's that. And then that comes down to the number of people you have on your platform. So as I told you today, we have roughly 12 million people using the website every month. So out of those 12 million people, as a doctor, you would get the number of new patients that you need. So that's how we do it.
But there is no solution, for instance, to get, for instance, one doctor has no booking because maybe it's at the end of at the bottom of the website, so there is no way to boost them up.
So the way it's if you go on Doctolib now and you choose the doctor, then the way they're going to be presented is you can choose, so you can have the closest to you, but you can have also the one that is available the soonest. And so in the end, the ones that is available the soonest probably is the one who is getting a bit less patients. So in the end, that's how we do it. We are not like a directory, like I don't know, La Fourchette, or I don't know. Even though those are great companies, but that's not what we're doing. We're not asking doctors to pay to be on top of the list. The only thing is.
That's not the plan.
No, totally. I mean, it's not about selling the audience that we have. The only thing that we want to do is making it easier for every patient in France and in Germany and in Europe to book an appointment with any doctor, and helping doctors to have a better organization. So that's only that. The objective is not to monetize the audience or to monetize the data. It's only facilitate the access to healthcare and provide the doctors and healthcare institutions with the best product. For us, that's the only thing. And with that, we know that there's so many things that we can do that we don't really focus on, monetizing an audience or making our customers pay to be well ranked. That's not what we are after.
Looking at the regulatory landscape, right? Are there any European-wide medical regulation or initiatives that is going to materially affect the way you operate? Like maybe attempts to unifying medical practices or laws or anything, or is it not something that is concerning you at this point?
Yeah, good question. So that's something that we are closely monitoring. Because one of our objectives is to know as much as possible on the healthcare market. So as much as the Ministry of Healthcare of France or Germany, we want to know as much as the guy or the girl. So that's ambitious, but that's what we're trying to do. And so obviously there's a lot of regulation. So in Germany now they are working on electronic patient file. So obviously this might have a big impact, or this will have a big impact on what we do. The regulation in the UK, for example, makes it really complicated to work with them. In France, there's a lot of talks about telemedicine. So they're trying to do it. They don't know exactly how to do it. So obviously, this will and can have a major impact on the way we operate. The only thing that we have to do is just to anticipate that as much as we can, and to think that if it's something that can help people find doctors or help doctors to be better organized, then we do it. That's simple as that. Thanks.
Hey. Doctolib.